You're listening to the Fierce Fatty Podcast, episode 193, Fat in Healthcare and Ideological Anti-Fatness. I'm your host, Vinnie Wellsby. Let's do it.
Perfect.
Hello, welcome to the show. So pleased to have you here. This is your refuge from anti-fat bullshit in the world. Come hang out with me. We'll have some good fatty times. Saying that, this episode is kind of trigger warning for anti-fat bullshit, stories of death by medical anti-fatness. Sorry. Sorry if you were coming here just for a fun time. But hey, listen, you might be in the US and listening to this on or near Thanksgiving. And if you are, and you are going to be spending time with people, even if you're not doing Thanksgiving and you're a human that's going to be spending time with other humans who are not fat positive, who are into diet culture, into shaming fatness, then I have a training that's happening on November the 20th, 2024, but there is a replay. So if you're listening to this after that date and the training sounds good, go and get the replay. I'll link it in the show notes, but it's Boundary Boss Live, How to Survive Anti-Fatness Over the Holidays, something like that. I'm not looking at it as we talk, but basically I'm going to be talking about how to deal with people in your life who are really fucking annoying, but you might love, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you don't, and you don't know how to deal with these people. So in my life, previous to this work, when I first came into this work, almost everyone around me was really into dieting, really into talking about their diets, really into hating fatness, and, you know, hoped for me that I would be thinner. And I was one of those people too. And it's really difficult when you're newer to fat liberation. We tend to be surrounded by a lot of people who are like, you know, tell you that your body is bad, or talk about how their body is bad and they have a smaller body than you, or they say, well, I'm just worried about your health, or whatever it is. And it can be difficult to find our feet and to know how to deal with those. And just by the way of what happened with me, 3 categories of the people that I used to be around a lot. Either one, they grew with me, I set boundaries, we came to an understanding, we understand and love each other and know how to communicate without harming each other around anti-fatness. 2, I have limited contact with those people, you know, if I'm forced to see them for whatever reason, limited contact, and I don't engage in body talk. Or 3, they're cut out from my life. And not saying that you need to do any of those things, because those things might not be appropriate for you or where you're at in your life and your circumstances. But that's what happened with me. And you know what? It's fucking amazing. I love the fact that I don't have to worry about the people I spend the most time with saying, oh my God, I'm so fat. Have you tried the new diet? You know, or whatever. I don't know why they would suddenly turn into an American, I don't know what type of accent that is. I'm being offensive to someone. Yeah, apart from, you know, a random person, on a random passerby being like, hey, diets. That happens sometimes. So you can't protect yourself from that. That happens sometimes, right? So anyway, yeah, if you're interested in that, go to the link in the show notes to either watch if you're come live if it's before the 20th, or watch the replay. And hey, I need to mention this. If you enjoy the show, then go check out Ko-fi, K-O-F-I, which is like Patreon, if you want to support my work. I have not had any new Ko-fi people in a while, you know what? And I was thinking, you know what? I've not told you about it, I don't think. Also, my podcast is only out once a month now. So anyway, if you like my work, you wanna sling me $5 or not, whatever. Ko-fi is a way to do it. Well, I guess with Ko-fi, if you don't want to sling me $5, don't go there. Do what you want. Oh my goodness. All right. But the podcast is funded by Ko-fi members to cover... I don't make money from doing the podcast. I lose money, but the current donations I have cover partially the costs for getting it edited and then all the other admin work on the backside. So yeah, that's me. Anyway, let's talk about fat in healthcare. I was inspired by this because I was talking with someone and they were telling me about this report that was done in BC, British Columbia, where I'm at, talking about racism, anti-Indigenous racism in healthcare. And so there was a report done, published, too long, didn't read, not the report I didn't read, I'm saying too long TLDR for you. So you know, if you want to know the gist of the report, there's tons of racism in healthcare. Surprise! Who knew? Yeah, everyone knew. Maybe not white people. Anyway, so this inspired me. The report inspired me to make this health episode, because I've got this picture in my mind of these stages. You know how I like visualizing things and making the Instagram posts, because I like visualizing things in simple ways. And I was thinking about the ways that fat folks are treated in healthcare. And it's also inspired me too. You know, I don't know if you remember, but in the summer I made the Fat at Work report, which was this epic, you can go get it, it's free, epic report where 300 plus of you completed a survey telling me about your experiences of being fat in the workplace. 96.65% of you said you experienced anti-fat bias in the workplace. So that's huge, gargantuan number, and I want to make that a one for healthcare as well. So I'm telling you now, I'm making this podcast to force myself to do the thing. I have ADHD, right? So sometimes I have these ideas in my head and I need to do something to force myself to do it. I've been thinking about it for a while. So I'm forcing myself to tell you about this survey, and the link to do the survey about your experiences about being fat and engaging in healthcare are going to be in the show notes. I've not yet created it, but I will by the time this episode comes out. And I would love to know your experiences. So this is going over the structural way that fat people engage in healthcare and what is going on, what to expect. I mean, you know, if you're fat, if you're gender marginalized, if you're any type of marginalized person, you know what it's like to engage in healthcare is eye-rolly, not great. But I want to share some stories, talk about some stuff. Again, if this is not feeling good for you, please skip this episode because I'm going to talk about some shit. Show links to everything that I'm talking about in the show notes. So I've got this, I'm going to post this on Instagram, but I'm thinking about this, 0 to 5 point scale type thing of how fat people are engaging in healthcare or accessing healthcare and what happens normally and what needs to happen instead. So if we look at level 0, what happens is level 0 is healthcare avoidance. So fat people can't or won't engage in healthcare due to previous bias and shit experiences that we've had, or delayed accessing healthcare. And the outcome of this is that health issues get worse, the treatment is delayed, and potentially death. I'm going to go into all of what actually the outcomes from having shitty anti-fat interactions with doctors leads to. So first off, fat people are not even engaging in healthcare a lot of the times because it's so traumatizing. Next, level 1 is initial contact. Initial contact, often we are denied healthcare. Full stop. Just full stop. Told, go away, lose weight, don't come back until you are this weight. An example of this is IVF clinics. A lot of IVF clinics won't even talk to a patient if their BMI is over a certain amount, and that BMI is low. They just won't even let them book an appointment. So someone's got the courage to go and to try and access healthcare, and immediately it's like, no, go away, you are denied basic healthcare. So level 2, again, initial contact. The concerns that are brought up by the patient are attributed solely or mostly on weight, and you're denied evidence-based healthcare, told to lose weight, plus other interventions that are not evidence-based, aka told to, quote, eat healthy and to, quote, exercise more without knowing how much you actually exercise or what you eat. This is being treated poorly due to size, judgment, and discrimination. So that leads to worse health outcomes and death. An example of this would be the IVF clinic, if you even get an appointment, won't offer healthcare unless the patient loses weight and blames weight on the reason why you're not able to conceive. And that's without testing. It's just looking at your body and saying, okay, well, you know, you got an appointment with the clinic, but the clinic is going to tell you, go away, lose weight. You can't get pregnant because you're fat. With literally just by using their eyeballs, no testing. And no test is going to say you're too fat to get pregnant because that test doesn't exist. So level 3, say you've got past those two, you've gone and seen someone, and now you're accessing healthcare. So at that point, you could experience infrastructural and institutional inequity. So infrastructural is the actual structures within healthcare, so unable to access equipment or treatment, etc. So this can cause delays in healthcare and worse health outcomes, or things like cut-offs on procedures for BMIs that are an institutional, so a part of the hospital. This hospital system says we don't give gender affirming care to people over a BMI of this. So institutionally, there's anti-fatness. And that could be as well with the initial contact, that institutional anti-fatness. But if you're engaging in healthcare, pretty likely you're going to be coming up against both these infrastructural and institutional anti-fatness. Okay, level 4, accessing healthcare. So if you are able to access healthcare, you may experience subpar care due to stereotypes and discrimination. And the outcome of this is worse care, worse health outcomes, and death. And so this is the judgments that healthcare providers might be making about a fat patient, that they're non-compliant, that they're lazy, that they're what's the point, because they're just going to, be lazy and greedy and horrible. And one I've spoken about a lot, an example of this is the H1N1 bird flu. Around COVID, when there was all, when I say around COVID, COVID's still a thing, but at the beginning of COVID, and everyone was like, oh my God, all fat people, they have worse health outcomes. And they said, hey, well, look at the bird flu. That happened there with the bird flu. Fat people had worse health outcomes. After they did a meta-analysis of all of the data and looked at what was actually going on, they found that fat patients would be being treated differently when accessing healthcare, and because of that, they were experiencing worse health outcomes. However, if a fat patient was treated the same as someone in a smaller body, they would have the same outcomes. And so then you're experiencing the subpar healthcare, and stage 5 is patient is unable to engage in healthcare or chooses not to in order to protect their mental and physical health. The outcome, worse care, worse health outcomes, and death. And we're back to the beginning. Unable to engage in healthcare, or choosing not to because it's not safe. And you could have already tried. We could have gone through this cycle many times, right? We could have tried to access healthcare and been cut off at level 1. Like, nope, you're not even getting through the door. Or if you get to level 2, you're getting through the door, but, lose weight, because that's clearly what's going on. And if you get to level 3, then it's, shit care, right? So I'm going to visualize this in an Instagram post, by the way. So poor outcomes of anti-fat bias in healthcare. Here's some stats for you. If you want some stats, we love a little stat. Okay, so studies have shown that up to 70% of healthcare providers may hold negative attitudes towards fat patients. I feel like that's conservative. Don't you? Yeah. You do, don't you? You think 70% is conservative. Yeah. And I think this is conservative too. 30 to 40% of fat patients experience bias from healthcare providers, including derogatory comments and unsolicited advice and inappropriate assumptions about their health behaviors. And by the way, we've got links for multiple studies for both of those. Lower quality healthcare, less likely to receive appropriate preventative care and more likely to experience misdiagnosis, delayed treatment, and have their concerns dismissed or attributed solely to their weight. We have increased mortality. The chronic stress induced by weight stigma can activate biological pathways that promote weight gain. Who cares? But more weight equals more stigma, including elevated cortisol levels, increased inflammation, and dysregulated metabolism. I'm quoting from an Upworthy article here that links to a couple of studies, and they wrote, a 2015 Lancet study found that doctors take less time with fat patients. By the way, almost all of these links contain O words, and even though they're talking about anti-fat bias and how it's bad, they still spout anti-fat bias bullshit. Honestly, the amount of articles where it says, oh my God, anti-fat bias is terrible, but fat people, they are really unhealthy. It's like, what? Can you not say, hello, you're writing an article about anti-fatness and you're starting off by right in there with the anti-fatness. Honestly, so every single one of these things, not every, actually there's like one or two that I'll tell you, the one that I know is good, has BS in there. Anyway, let me finish the quote. A 2015 Lancet study found that doctors take less time with fat patients and are more reluctant to screen them for other health issues. It also found that healthcare workers tend to stereotype fat people as less likely to follow medical advice and stick to medications. A 2017 review of research from the American Psychological Association also found that medical discrimination based on people's size is a real issue, and fat patients are more likely to have undiagnosed medical issues. Quote, in one study of over 300 autopsy reports, fat patients were 1.65 times more likely than others to have significant undiagnosed medical conditions, for example, endocarditis, ischemic bowel disease, and lung carcinoma, indicating misdiagnosis or inadequate access to healthcare. Quoting from a Washington Post article. By the way, I've linked to things that are behind a paywall through archive.ph. Archive.ph, if you ever hit a paywall, just put your link in there and it will redirect you for you to be able to read it. There's a Washington Post article, Doctors Have Fat Phobia Too, which does serious harm to patients, by Kate Mann. The illustration is really fucking good. There's an illustration done by Michelle Condrich, and there's a patient sat, and there's a doctor or a healthcare provider in scrubs and gloves and a mask, and the patient's sticking out their tongue, and they've got that wooden stick on the tongue, and the little lights, what's it called, the fucking flashlight, torch if you're the British, the flashlight, which should be looking in the patient's mouth, is directed onto their belly. I thought that was a really smart image. So, and it looks like that the healthcare provider is looking in their mouth, but the flashlight is just illuminating the belly. Anyway, a couple of quotes from that piece. One study showed that fat patients were rated more negatively by doctors on 12 out of 13 indexes, including, this patient would feel like a waste of my time, and this patient would annoy me. We receive fewer expressions of empathy and concerns from providers who build less rapport with fat patients and often hold that we are lazy and non-compliant. Such views are not only false, they contravene the moral principle that everybody deserves humane, compassionate medical care regardless of their weight or health status. Okay, we've got some stories from that worthy article. These are people's, self-reporting. So anyway, my little sister started to feel fatigued and dizzy at 9 years old. She felt nauseated at the sight of food and had abdominal pain that increased with physical activity. Mum got her to the ER and the doctors dismissed it, saying she's fat and probably is feeling ill after eating too much burgers. Get her to do some exercise and she'll feel better in no time. My mum didn't feel okay with the diagnosis and took my sister to a second doctor who also told her that the child was fat. My sister's skin was starting to get yellow as the days passed and the abdominal pain was getting awful. So my mum, heaven bless her, got her to the ER for the third time. She had stage 4 hepatitis and was about to die. She survived after a long and painful recovery, which involved being in bed for a whole year. Remember that we're speaking about a 9-year-old child. Luckily, they saved her liver and she didn't go through a transplant, but let this sink in. If it weren't for my mother, fat phobia would have killed her. Fat phobia kills kids and teenagers. Fat phobia kills innocent people every day. It treats human beings as lesser than others and hurts them in the most vulnerable times. It's a real shame that we all have so many stories to share about this issue. A real shame. There's a tweet from Everett Dion at Free Black Girl. I discovered today that doctors have been gaslighting me for over 3 years. I've had a real medical problem that they've been attributing to me being fat. Fuming is an understatement. They've been overlooking a problem in one of my vital organs and saying all the symptoms were caused by the size of my body. If I've not gone to the doctor thinking I was having an asthma attack, the problem would not have been found. Another story. A friend from college who had been going to the doctors because she was having trouble breathing. She was told to lose weight. Over the course of several years, she went back to the doctors time and time again, telling them that she'd been sticking to the diet, but because of her breathing problems, she had been unable to even walk more than 20 minutes at a time. The doctor got her into an exercise program and told her that she just needed to really try to lose weight because that was clearly the reason for the breathing problems. By the time they found the tumour in her lungs, it was inoperable. She only lived 3 months after diagnosis. She was 25. She'd had the tumour for over 5 years. The doctor was so focused on the fact that my friend was fat that they refused to look for any underlying cause. They killed her. Someone responded, weight first treatment kills, fat phobia kills. So other outcomes from all of this bullshit is obviously death. There's a piece from a website called Stat. Stat is exclusive for biopharma health policy and life science analysis. Anyway, the article is, my sister's cancer might have been diagnosed sooner if doctors could have seen beyond her weight. And so I'm pulling some quotes from there. My older sister Jam visited me in San Francisco last spring. The author is Laura Fraser, by the way. My older sister Jam visited me in San Francisco last spring. You look great, I told her, noticing that her clothes were hanging loose. She'd been heavy most of her life. I've lost 60 pounds, she said, and I automatically congratulated her. I wasn't trying, she replied. It hit me then that something was very wrong, first with her health, but also with the way that I assumed that her weight loss was a sign of well-being. My own judgments and shame associated with being fat got in the way of seeing my sister. Looking closer, her face seemed strained, and despite the constant smile she turned on, she wasn't well. She told me that she'd been in so much pain that she'd had little appetite for months. I asked Jan if she'd seen a doctor. She had, but it hadn't gone well. The doctor she'd known for years had converted his practice into a concierge service, and she hadn't wanted to pay the extra $15,000 to stay with him. So she made an appointment with an OBGYN. A friend had recommended. Jan's eyes welled up as she described the visit. She had run down her symptoms: vaginal bleeding, unexplained weight loss, and near constant pelvic pain. She told me the doctor hadn't taken her complaint seriously, dismissing her concerns and performing a routine examination. He didn't do anything for me, and he didn't find anything. He just saw me as a fat, complaining older woman, Jan said. Demeaned and discouraged, she didn't seek a second opinion right away. Instead, she explored possible causes of her abdominal pain, wasting months avoiding dairy and gluten and taking over-the-counter pain medications. During our visit in San Francisco, I encouraged Jan to see another doctor to get to the bottom of what was ailing her. A few months later, she finally got an appointment at an internist's office. A physician assistant examined her. Jan arrived at the visit weak and racked with pain. She came out of it in tears, with no answers and no relief. She wouldn't give me anything because she thought I was just trying to get an opioid fix, she told Cynthia, who had accompanied her. Did the physician assistant think Jan was putting on an act to cadge drugs because she was fat, and that despite her detailed and articulate medical complaints, not to mention her obvious and tremendous pain, she fit some undisciplined drug-seeking profile. The physician's assistant did at least send Jan to have some blood tests. When she had finished giving blood, she was so exhausted she couldn't drive herself home. Very early the next morning, Jan got a call from the internist who, even though he had never met her, told her to immediately go to the emergency room. She was quickly admitted to the intensive care unit in critical condition with a sky-high level of calcium in her blood. An MRI revealed an enormous mass in her abdomen. When Jan was stable enough for surgery, the hospital's gynecologic oncologist removed the largest endometrial tumor that he said he'd ever seen, the size of a volleyball ball. It had peppered her pelvis with cancer, infiltrating her bladder and other organs. The MRI also showed spots on Jan's lungs, likely signs that the disease was spreading even further. In hindsight, endometrial cancer is an easy disease to Google. The first few hits reveal signs and symptoms: unexplained weight loss, vaginal bleeding after menopause, pelvic pain. Jan had them all. I'm no doctor, and I know that physicians are not infallible, but it strikes me that those symptoms, the ones the patient came in worried about, should have raised red flags far more than the fact that she was fat. Jan went through a few rounds of chemotherapy and lost even more weight. She took some perverse pleasure at being able to fit into normal size clothes. I'm putting a quotation there. And fashionable clothes for the first time in her life, not the unsophisticated, uninspired garments that most manufacturers muster for plus-size women. By then, she'd lost about 100 pounds, and despite her conspicuous illness, the wig, the pallor, the fear in her eyes, people kept on complimenting her about her weight loss. They too saw only her size. Jan died last Christmas Eve, 6 months after learning she had cancer. That's not the full article. If you want to read it, there's obviously some little bits of anti-fatness in there and the O words, but I feel like it was written with compassion. And that's from 2017. And then this person has written a book on this topic. One's called Losing It: America's Obsession with Weight and the Industry That Feeds on It. I've not heard of that. Maybe I have. Let me look at it. So I don't want to say go read it because I don't know if this is a safe person. No, I've not. Okay. Well, I guess it is from 1997. No. Anyway, that story. Another story that was gained a lot of attention was of a Canadian person who in her obituary, let me just read it. So Ellen Maud Bennett, daughter, sister and aunt. Ellen Maud Bennett, who passed away aged 64 on May 11th, 2018, was to most who met her an unforgettable character. I'm reading bits from the obituary, by the way. This photo was taken 1 week before her death, and the photo shows a white woman with long blonde hair, unsmiling, looking at the camera. She looks pretty vibrant. And it says she chose it for her obituary because, as she said, I look so good for someone almost dead. She sounds funny. A final message Ellen wanted to share was about the fat shaming she endured from the medical profession. Over the last few years of feeling unwell, she sought out medical intervention and no one offered any support or suggestions beyond weight loss. Ellen's dying wish was that women of size make her death matter by advocating strongly for their health and not accepting that fat is the only relevant health issue. So listen here. Now, I know what some people might be feeling after listening to those two stories. They're worried, oh my God, is that going to be me? And I want you to know that just by knowing about fat liberation and knowing that you deserve healthcare is almost like a little bit of an immunization from anti-fatness. Not a complete one, because we're going to experience it, right? And at times we're going to be like, oh God, is this true? Am I a terrible person that just needs to lose weight? But you've got this kind of foundation of knowing, that doesn't sound right. And hopefully that turning into advocating for yourself and not saying that these people who, Ellen and Jan who died, it's their fault. It's not their fault. Not, absolutely not. But maybe if they had extra tools at their disposal, maybe the exact same thing would happen, because, doctors that, can behave like anti-fat donkeys. But I want to just make you not take away from that, oh my God, you are going to have the same experience. I mean, you might. Who knows what's going to happen in our lives? But by understanding we are worth healthcare and that losing weight is not going to cure your condition, we may be able to advocate for ourselves better. We may get better outcomes, we may not, right? And the type of cancer that Jan had was a particularly aggressive type of cancer. I'm not sure about Ellen, we didn't have that extra information. But just because someone is diagnosed with cancer doesn't mean that they will die. By the way, Ellen died 5 days after her diagnosis. So thinking about all of this stuff, it makes me think about the image that I made, which is the levels of anti-fat bias. And if you are familiar with it, it's the thing that looks like a triangle, but I'm going to describe it out for you. There's a triangle and it's split into 4 equal sections. And at the top one says intrapersonal or internalized anti-fat bias. So that is your beliefs about fat people or fatness. And so if you're a fat person, you're going to have internalized anti-fatness. That's going to look like negative self-talk, agreeing with anti-fat beliefs, trying not to be fat by dieting and taking drugs, etc. If you were in a smaller body, you're going to have internalized size privilege. So that's a belief that having a smaller body makes you morally superior and is due to the better choices and behavior that fat people fail to make that you do make. So a lot of doctors will have that internalized size privilege and will have that, well, it's easy for me to be this size, all I do is, probably the same thing that a fat person does, lives their life or whatever it is that they do. And are looking at fat people like, why can't you just get your shit together? Do what I do what I tell you, and stop being so XYZ, right? The next level on the triangle is interpersonal. So we're going down from the top of the triangle, and that's how individuals treat fat people. And so that's things like being fat shamed and rejected as a romantic partner, fat jokes, diet talk, told to lose weight. And so interpersonal, if you're talking to a doctor, they could be giving you some of that interpersonal anti-fat bias. The next level, so we cut it in half, like the first 2, they are like surface level. When I say surface level, I don't mean they're not that impactful. They are very impactful. But when we think about anti-fatness, we think about how the way we feel about ourselves and how others treat fat people. And we don't necessarily think about what's below the surface, but we need to consider all aspects, all levels of anti-fat bias if we're going to dismantle anti-fat bias. And especially the bottom 2. The bottom 2 are institutional and ideological. So institutional is the belief society holds about fatness and how it treats others or you due to those beliefs. And so these are things like being denied access to IVF, adoption, fostering children, employment, donating your body to science, buying a home, health and life insurance, immigration and citizenship, gender affirmation surgery, organ transplants, etc., as if that list isn't enough, right? So institutional, I would lump in here as well, is the infrastructural, which is the structural way that you're denied, not being able to find seats or MRI machine that fits or a gown that fits, etc. in healthcare. So institutionally, healthcare practitioners are wherever they're working will have institutional anti-fat bias. And finally, ideological, which is what I've titled the podcast, is talking about ideological, which is the idea that fat people are inferior ethically, morally, and don't deserve dignity and respect. And it's a social, cultural, and political belief. And that's everybody knows that fat people are unhealthy, lazy, and unattractive, and we should just lose weight. And that is what I think that is the basis of the issues with healthcare, is the ideological anti-fatness that is woven into a healthcare provider's brain. And all of our brains, right? Not healthcare providers are not special, but from before they've even started their training, throughout their training and throughout their career, they are taught to ideologically believe that fat people are inferior. And there might be some softening on that. And the softening is what we're seeing now with the organizations like Novo Nordisk, who are the manufacturers of Ozempic, who are trying to push this narrative that it's not the fault of fat people that they're fat and lazy and greedy and disgusting. It's not their fault. They have some type of problem, like it's a disease, right? That's a softening of the ideological anti-fatness. It's the idea of love the sinner, hate the sin. That fatness is inherently bad, but fat people can't help it. So let's treat them poorly with a smile on our face. So that's where we're at now. That softening of ideological anti-fatness, which is not helpful. Because the solution, when you've got that softening of ideological anti-fatness, when I say softening, I'm not sure if that's the right word. It's maybe morphing, changing. The solution is still to erase fat people, right? It's still to kill fat people. It's still to rid the planet of fat people. So we need to change that ideological anti-fatness piece in order to change all of those other areas in healthcare, right? I feel like it's, obviously we need to be able to access healthcare, but if we're stopped and have gowns that fit and wheelchairs and blah, 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 all that stuff, but if we can't even get our foot in the door because we know that we're going to experience interpersonal anti-fatness, institutional anti-fatness, we're not going to get to the place where we can put on a gown that doesn't fit. And if we do get to that place, we're wearing a gown that doesn't fit, we'll already be harmed by ideological anti-fatness. So this is the article, the one link that I would say is safe. It's from AMA Journal of Ethics, Illuminating the Art of Medicine. 5 Ways Healthcare Can Be Better for Fat People by Kristen A. Hardy, M.A. I feel like I know of Kristen, like we've probably messaged. Kristen, if you're listening, hi, love your work. So, quote from this: fat suffering and death. Much of the existing work on better accommodating fat people's needs within North American healthcare settings focuses on reducing stigma and addressing inadequate medical equipment. In some cases, inadequate equipment and surgery-related issues can be a matter of life or death. The computed tomography or magnetic resonance imaging scanner that was not designed to accommodate the bodies of larger members of the population. The surgeon who never learned to operate on fat bodies because their medical school refused the donation of fat cadavers. By the way, most places don't take fat people for research or anything like that. I say fat, people over 180 pounds, which is not fat. So all of the research is being done on thin people. Refuse the donation of fat cadavers or the loss of life due to impaired health and well-being from bariatric surgery. These deaths are collectively uncountable. The results, however, is the loss of precious lives and the irreversible trauma to families, friends, and communities. Other outcomes are not as often as deadly, but may result in significant damage to physical or psychological health when, for example, clinicians' expressions of weight bias result in, quote, healthcare seekers of higher weight ceasing all contact with clinicians, joint replacements in healthy people being denied on the basis of BMI, or eating disorders being induced or re-triggered by the bigoted comments of those entrusted with healing. To every survivor of medical weight bias, the suffering in limitation of activities, economic impoverishment through imposed disability or other negative consequences are lived experiences that come on top of the already serious health impacts of broader social and cultural fat phobia. Yes, yet these sequelae of encounters with medical fat phobia cannot be tackled apart from their root causes, the dominance of thin-centric ideology, but the pathologization of fatness, a failure to foster the leadership of fat people, and a biomedical health system that continues to elevate the power of physicians over that of healthcare seekers, fat and otherwise. Ultimately, We cannot understand and effectively address the specifics of the induced suffering of fat people within or excluded from biomedical contexts without looking to the poor inequalities that ground and support them. To the power inequalities that ground and support them. That's a good, it's not too long, this piece. So you can probably read it in 10 minutes, 7 minutes, 1 minute. No, I don't know how long it'll take you to read, but anyway, that's from 2023. Really great. How am I going to end this? Hey, listen, this is how I'm going to end it. Listen, some good news, okay? Some good news. So I train organizations, right? I help individuals and organizations and learn anti-fat bias. And I got to tell you, things are changing 100%. Oh, not they're changing 100%, but I 100% feel like they're changing. Really, really, really. So I've been doing this work for 10 years, longer, I think, probably. I always need to go and check my LinkedIn to see how long I've been doing this work. And I'm like, what? Jesus, has that been that long? I'm always like, oh, it's 7 years. And it's like, no, it's 11 years or whatever. I don't know. Let's just say 10, whatever. Anyway, 10 years ago, just absolutely not. Absolutely not. This felt very, like a very, very, very difficult topic to get people to get on board with. Whenever I'd be having conversations, by the way, this is my experience, okay? So take that with a grain of salt, whatever it's called. But if I had conversations with people 10 years ago, and I was having conversations with people 10 years ago, hey, fat people are human and, you know, wild things like that. What are you talking about, Vinny? Fat people are not human, you silly sausage. Anyway, I would be getting a lot of pushback. I remember about 7 years ago. So I used to be in recruitment. So I had a lot of contacts in HR in Vancouver. Many, many, many contacts. And I remember about 7 years ago, and then again about 5 years ago, reaching out to all of those HR people and saying, hey, if your organization wants to include this in their DEI planning, and no one was interested. No one was interested. Now, they're really fucking interested. Some people, though, there is obviously there's still there's still lots of people. And I'm talking about people who are leaders and maybe in the DEI world. But people are hungry for this now. People are like, yeah, fat people are human. I'm on board. And I think that we should be kind to fat people, you know? Whereas 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it would be like, are fat people human? And there'd be a few people who were like, yeah. But a lot of people were like, And some people were like, but only if they're healthy. So things, this is my anecdotal, very kind of rough idea of feeling of this work of, we're getting to that point where everyone knows. And, you know, like, for example, I did a training with healthcare providers, I don't know, a month ago. And I said to them, so how many diets, you know, what do we know about diets? How many diets work, basically? I said it in a more robust way, but how many diets work? And many of them said 0. And I was like, what the fuck? Huh? How do you lot know that diets don't work? This is amazing. Some of them were like, oh, you know, yeah, but what about this one? And so that basic thing of like diets don't work, a lot of them knew. But then there was still kind of, yeah, but my patient's fat, so, and the fatness is causing the problem, so how do I get them to listen to me and not be fat anymore? You know, this is after the training, and, and I'm like, no. Anyway, they might not have been listening to the training and just randomly asked. Anyway, whatever. I'm so thankful about that. It really, 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 really makes me excited about what the future holds for fat folks. Knowing that things are maybe, ? Continuing to get better, ? I'm even just saying that. I feel scared that I've just jinxed it and, you know, I'm just delusional. I don't know. Again, if you wanted to come to that training, if you're around family in the next couple of months, or if you're around anyone ever, just for the rest of your life, that talk shit about fat people and whatnot, and you want to know how to deal with them and some strategies and word tracks, all that jazz, come along to my training. Link will be in the show notes. Boundary Boss live. Or get the replay. If you enjoyed the show and you want to contribute to more cool fat stuff, go to Ko-fi. You get some free stuff in return. And thanks for hanging out with me today. It was it's nice. I like doing podcasts. I feel like I'm hanging out with people, but I'm on my own. I just imagine, I don't know, we're in a big group together listening, talking about fat stuff, and it's just me on my own. This is my fantasy. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with me today. Remember, you are worthy. You always were. You always will be. And stay fierce, fatty. See you next time. Goodbye. Tatty bye.